Otherwise, it's confusing. Oh, tiny water. Okay. Oh, what are we doing here?
I don't know.
Okay. You're in. You're strapped in. Okay. Hi. Hi. Can you all hear me? Okay. Vaguely. Somebody say vaguely? You can hear me. All right, so thank you all so much for being here. I think this is such a serious topic, and I was a little worried that people would be kind of freaked out and scared off, and you all came. You're all here, so thank you. And thank you so much to Josh and Dan for recognizing that this is an important topic and for helping us to actually have this panel, because this is kind of a big deal, and most conferences don't have panels like this, so yeehaw. I'm just going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to let these fine folks introduce themselves. My name is Meg Lewis. I'm a designer. I'm also a member of Ghostly Ferns. Oh, there you are. We are a collective of freelancers, but really we're best friends who found a way to work together every day. And let's start off with Jenna. You got this.
Is it on? Oh, hello. My name is Jenna Blazevich. I own Vitchcraft, which is a design studio based in Chicago, and I'm a feminist.
My name is Toya B. Levi. I am the co-owner of Grits Co., and I too am a feminist.
Oh.
My name is Tuesday Bassam. I own a shop called Funmark, and I'm also an illustrator, and I'm a feminist.
And I'm Matt Ryder. I'm with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, Allsec, and I am the only feminist on stage with a beard.
Visible beard. Sorry. All right.
I went to a feminist burlesque show a few weeks ago called, I swear to God, called Fly Honeys, and she called it a public beard, as opposed to...
Oh, I was in a... I get it. I was making a joke I didn't even know I was making. Wow, okay. Woo! Good stuff. Let's go. Okay. The way a panel works, there are questions, we're gonna answer them, we're just gonna have a conversation. We are all kind of figuring out this topic as we go. I think that's the cool part about our society today and feminism as a topic in general is we're all learning, and that's the really great part about these events is we can sort of have a conversation and we can learn and just sort of sit back and listen. And these people all have their own unique perspectives, which is pretty special. So I want you all to just kind of go down the row and tell us, what does feminism mean to you?
Definitely this is the hardest question, very broad. But I think for me, it just means looking at the world through a lens that allows me to be more compassionate and understanding of other people's experiences in this world that have things or don't have things, or things are easier or more difficult for them. It helps me have a label for like trying to have it's a toughie.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Just compassion really. That's all.
That's good. That's good.
Know.
Feminism to me is not necessarily that we hate men or anything bad about men. We love men just as well as we love our women's. Not all of us. There's several areas of feminism. So somebody's angry back there. But I think more or less is just the empowerment of women is what I encourage and what I believe in. The empowerment to be with other women and feel the strength to know that we can do anything a man can do and that we should be treated equally.
Feminism is just that people of either gender are treated equally.
I'm going to have a quick story. I would not have been able to be up here and to even speak on this without perspective. For years, me and my brother have accused my mother openly of being a workaholic. It's something that we were constantly tearing her apart about. And then 6 months ago, my mom was promoted to executive vice president of a software company. It's her first time ever being an executive of a company. And I realized that over the last 15 years, the grief that we had given her about not going on family vacation or not taking time out during the holidays wasn't because she had that choice. It was because in order to reach that goal, she had to work that extra amount. And that's when I sort of like committed myself to making sure that that doesn't happen to the people that work with me.
Go,
I don't know
Mom.
if that's a definition.
Your mom rules. So my question now is, why is this a conversation, why is this panel important? Like, why is talking about feminism a conversation that we should be having at all? Anybody?
Well, I think it's important just because we still are fighting for some of those equal rights that we haven't received quite yet on the same standards of a lot of men. Not only that, but like I was saying backstage, out of all the countries in the UN, they've all signed a waiver basically trying to give women equal rights. The only country that refuses to do so is the United States. So we need to make sure these things get put into place so that we can have equal pay and we can have equal rights for our women. We do just as much work and we work just as hard as many of the men do. Like I said, we love our men, don't get me wrong, but we just want to be treated equally. So that's why this conversation is so important for us to have, to show that we're doing a lot of the same jobs that you guys are doing. We just want to have that equal respect.
That's perfect. So I think that in general, I'm sure we've all noticed that feminism is certainly trending right now. I think if it's anything from Medium articles to panels like this one to people's shop products, there's a lot of pins and patches that say feminist and, women's rights issues sayings on them. So I think specifically with Jenna and Tuesday, I know you both have experience with this. Why do you think that feminism is trending right now?
Well, we talked a little bit about backstage about this point in information access and how we all are able to connect with each other in a way that is unprecedented. And I think that in the past, the waves of feminism that have come before this current fourth one, certain very important groups of people were left out, and that was a result of people only connecting with each other on issues that they were familiar with. And without the ability to connect via Twitter on your phone or be held accountable for how you're fighting your issues, the waves, moved at the rate that they did and, fizzled out. And this one that we're in currently has a power that the previous ones did not. And the fact that it's trending is really important because we have, ways to connect with each other, and we have people with these insane platforms that can, change the way that the conversation is being had about something like feminism, like over the course of a day. Like if Beyonce says that word and decides that she's not scared of labeling herself as a feminist, it does amazing things for this wave of the movement. So I certainly like to think that this isn't a trend in the sense that it's going anywhere, that we're empowering women, not just because this is like something popular and we want to buy a cool pin. Like this is something where we're educating people about something that should be a lifelong thing for everyone.
I agree. I think the internet is amazing because it helps lift up marginalized voices that maybe otherwise wouldn't have had a platform. Especially when the media is controlled by people who don't look like you. And, I think it's trending right now because also we're seeing platforms for smaller designers and makers to put work out there and not have to run it by anybody or satisfy a middleman or consider sales. So that's definitely why it's trending, like smaller entities are pushing for awareness, and larger companies are taking notice. Like, I don't know if you saw H&M's new campaign. It was a really cool video, but I think as we see feminism trending, we have to hold companies accountable that are going to use feminism in their marketing campaigns. Are they producing their clothing in a way that is respectful to women and to individuals in general? Are they exploiting minority workers? Are they exploiting women that are working for them? So it's important as this becomes a trending topic that we don't just look at, the glossiness of the video, it's very well done, but we also consider the actions taken to prove that it is something that they actually care about. And I think that that's amazing that we have that platform.
Oh yeah, totally. So I think it's no secret that when it comes to women, they definitely enroll in more art and design degree courses. I think if any of you went to school for art or design, you know that most of the classes were full of women. And yet when it comes to actual careers in the design and the tech industry, as we all also know, those careers usually go a little bit and skew towards more men, obviously, especially management positions, as we know. So I think that I'm really curious to see sort of why we think this is actually happening. And I think most of us are self-employed except for Matt. So Matt, do you think that you have any thoughts on this?
I have a hard time with that particular one because in my organization at ALSAC, I think this is about right. I think it's 73% women, and all of my bosses, all the way up through the executive level, are women, except for my direct report. But it is a very female-driven organization because of charitable giving and because it's pediatric. So that for me, it may not allow me to understand why there are less women in other industries. But I understand that the women in the industry that I work in have chosen that for a very specific reason. Like they've chosen philanthropy and pediatric care as a position that they want to be in. So it's interesting to see where women have chosen to really make their impact and make their influence. I think that even though that statistic is very real, I think that there are specific industries within design and within marketing that women have chosen and set in and become sort of a foundational element in that. And I know that my industry is definitely that case. When I talk to people who are at the Salvation Army or people who are at Shriners, it's driven by women. It really is. So
It definitely seems like it's an industry-based problem, right? Because I think a lot of tech startups, for the most part, don't employ women as much as men. But some startups do, and some startups I find employ mostly women. And like you're saying, nonprofits and organizations like St. Jude also do. So Jenna, you were talking backstage and you had something really interesting. Do you want to just kind of repeat it to the audience about this topic?
Yes, I have a stat. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, your stat.
Yeah, my stat. Well, there's a documentary. I'm pretty sure it's still on Netflix. It's called Misrepresentation, MISS, and it's all about women, how they're portrayed in the media, and how that affects like young minds and the way that we pursue our careers. And the statistic, I guess, is that there are more big companies run by men named John than women.
Then women total, not women named John.
No, women. Women. Which is, that has definitely an effect on the way that you feel as a lower level employee when you're starting out after you go to design school and you want to be a designer, and then you start out at a company where you see that like as you get higher up, it becomes women are less represented, and to confidently walk into those interviews and think that like you have a major opportunity in that place as like you could move up. It's hard to imagine yourself doing that, and it's hard to have the confidence to walk in and ask for the salary that you think you deserve when you're being looked at, by a man who's deciding like whether or not you are qualified or you're worth that amount and stuff. And so it is, it's not surprising to think about why those women kind of like fall into other things than what they originally went to school for. Yeah.
Meg, can I turn that question back around on you guys? Because do you ever feel like being self-employed gives you an advantage in that way? Because you don't have to necessarily deal with the red tape or the bureaucracy that would go along with it?
Yeah, I think the issue happens is that women or girls are hardwired from birth to not like themselves, and we're sort of hardwired to have low self-esteem just because of the media. We're sort of made to hate the way that we look so that we can constantly be consuming things and buying things to make ourselves a little bit better. And so that gives us really bad self-esteem. And I think that boys and men don't have that same problem exactly because they usually aren't portrayed the same way by media and by pop culture. So whenever they grow up, they think that they can just take things because they have rock hard self-esteem compared to most women. And so when girls grow up and to become women, they think that they're not good enough constantly. We're constantly thinking that we aren't good enough. And I know that this is a problem that everyone deals with. But in general, women they grow up to think that they're not worthy of positions. So rather than with most men, this is statistical that men are able to just go and get what they want and not be afraid of rejection, and they think that they're worthy, which they are, and which women are as well. But we're a little bit more susceptible to thinking that we can't have something. And that's really sad. And I think that I'm fortunate enough to have really, really great self-esteem. And so I don't want anybody to hold me back. I know exactly what I want, and I'm going to get it, which is why I never wanted to have a boss. So that's the reason why I work for myself. And that's also a reason why I don't have a boss, is because I think that I'm not as good as other people. And because that's how I was raised to believe, is that other people are better at their job than I am. So if I was competing with other people to get an actual position at a company, I wouldn't want to do that, because I would think that they'd be better and they'd obviously get it. But for me, not having a jobby job means that I have no competition except for myself. And myself is pretty awesome. And so I can always keep going up and up and up on my personal ladder.
I can agree with you on that. I know that even though I'm self-employed as well, I still have issues when it comes to working with men outside of my company. I could email something saying something wasn't right, or you misprinted something that I was getting made, and the vendor will sometimes act funny with me, but let me CC my husband on it, then you want to act correct. And that doesn't make any sense. Sometimes you have to check people and make sure they let you let them know that no matter what, I shouldn't have to CC him for you to get my money. I'm paying you, right? But people will try to treat you that way. And so it's the same thing. It's kind of like you have to have that self-esteem. You have to have that drive and have that determination to say, no matter what, I'm still going to go about it and do my business and handle it no matter what. And at the end of the day, I think when you do have strong women like that, then the first thing they want to call you is out your name. And that's not the necessary way to go. And sometimes you have to just take it for what it is and say, okay, I'll be that. But you don't always want to have to feel like somebody has to call you out your name for you to be a strong, outspoken woman.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that with a lot of equality issues, there's this really strong unconscious bias that everyone has, that we were sort of, again, raised by pop culture to have, that we don't know we have it, but we are biased against women. And I think even all women are sort of hardwired this way too. And I think that's the importance of the feminist movement. But I wonder at the same time, like, how can we actually point out something that's completely invisible and work together to solve it?
I think definitely listening to people. I mean, I don't have a great response for this one, because this is a difficult thing, you know? But when people are willing to share what is their experience with you, and it's different from your own, like, for example, if you're a man and you're being talked to by a woman about her experience, it's important to be able to, like, check yourself and be able to listen and have compassion for their experience, and not feel like if she's moving forward that something's being taken away from you. And that's the bummer about, like, the word feminist is so polarizing for people, because they hear, like, man hater, like that something is going to be lesser than for a man in that society if a woman is being given the rightful opportunity that the man was given. So being compassionate and understanding when someone's, like, sharing something with you is one of the ways that, like, yeah, we can't talk about, it is an invisible thing, yeah, to live in a patriarchal society where, like, things are set up in a certain way for, major things are set up for men to have an easier time in a lot of ways than women, to, like, hear from people and listen to them. I feel like I'm kind of babbling, but that's, I'm just gonna.
I think I can expand on that a little bit too. I hear what you're saying with the actual vernacular of feminism, right? And I did this whole talk on empathy yesterday. If you missed it, it was great. But empathy is really important, and I talk about it a lot because as designers and as human beings, it is a thing that I really value. The problem can be, and from a man's perspective, and this is why I was so uncomfortable even having this discussion for so long. I can't believe I'm talking for all you people about it. But the word feminism resonated with me in a way that related to effeminate qualities. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that in itself would threaten me feeling masculine or my own masculinity. I never wanted to be perceived as effeminate, right? That was a direct sort of challenge to who I felt like I was. So I would never say that I was a feminist because I didn't want that to be misconstrued with being effeminate. And I think that the vernacular is the biggest problem with a majority of these conversations that we try to have, is we don't know how to talk to each other in a way that means it's really about empathy and it's really about understanding. It's not about a term. It's not about, liking or not liking the other sex. It's really about understanding. And so I think for the guys in the room, that's an interesting perspective to give to women, is that we don't always hear feminism. We don't want to necessarily be perceived as effeminate. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Sure, okay. Totally.
That's a good segue into the question about aesthetics.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So, thank you. You should lead this as
moderator.
So that's a good segue into the question about aesthetics. Well, we're totally at a design conference here, so let's talk about design a little bit. There's such a big difference between feminine design and those things that you imagine. Just like close your eyes and think about feminine design, and all those things that you think about. Florals, colors, wedding invites. You know what I mean. And then there's all those things that you think about when you think masculine design, of reclaimed wood and the smoldering fire. I can smell masculine design is what happens for me. But that's really interesting, and I think that creates a weird riff in our community too. And so I'm just kind of wondering, how, this is such a broad question, but how do you think that in general shapes our culture? What's happening there?
In general, what shapes our culture? How we perceive masculine and feminine artwork?
Just give us a moment while we think here.
Well, when I first started making artwork, I think for a while people didn't know if I was a man or a woman because at the time, now my color scheme is all pink. But at the time, I was using a lot more cool tones, and I think it kind of threw people off, which is interesting that you could just change the colors, and it could literally be Barbie pink, and they're like, oh, woman made this. Blue. So I think it's really interesting to play with stereotypically masculine imagery. I draw big hulking girls that are have wide shoulders and their knuckles are scraping on the pavement, but to use stereotypically masculine ideas with a feminine color palette, I feel is a really it's such a simple subversion, but it's also really effective. And yeah, I think it is interesting that you can shift one, trade out a watercolor texture for a wood texture, and all of a sudden people are like, what the fuck are you doing? But I don't know, I think it goes to show you that it doesn't matter at all. I don't know that there actually is an inherently feminine or masculine thing. We just adopt those to avoid confusion, I guess, for people who can't intellectually understand the complexities of gender.
I don't know why she looked at me when she said that.
Can we all just give Matt a round of applause for surviving this so far?
I was just trying to be inclusive.
I appreciate that.
My full attention.
He's such a champ.
I think that I've taken a lot of inspiration from female artists. I can particularly call out one that changed my own perspective of women. B. Croft had a huge influence over me, but I didn't ever see B. Croft's work until I had originally studied a lot of the stuff that Kanye West was doing in his art direction and his set design. I know Kanye's polarizing. I don't want to talk about it. But B. Croft had kind of done this thing where she had stood people in a room and challenged them, right, with what females look like and how females are so different from one another just as human beings. And it's interesting to see that bleed back into pop culture. It's interesting to see that bleed back into the media because those sort of influences now are happening more and more, whether we all recognize it or not. A lot of those things started at a basic level with a woman just creating. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I think I would love to hear from personal experience in general. Everyone's just sort of like basic do's and don'ts for feminism as a whole topic based on their personal experience. Because I think for me, as a woman that's also speaks at events and does things like this from time to time, I would say 75% of the events that I've attended as a speaker have been, the first email I receive is, hey, I didn't know any women and I asked around and people recommended you. So since
People
I need
actually
more
say
women,
that to you?
Yeah, most of the time. 75% of the time, for sure. And they say, would you like to be a part of my event? And it's really hard to say yes to that because obviously they don't know me at all. They just ask me because I'm a woman. But I always say yes because giving people in general more exposure to women and women on stage is so helpful. And the comments I get after I speak a lot are that, oh, I didn't know there were any really good women speakers, or like, women aren't usually very good at speaking, so it's nice to finally meet one. I get a lot of those comments, and people have no idea what they're doing, and that's completely fine. And what I like to do is I take it upon myself to just talk back to them and say, you know, there are lots of other women like me that speak, and we're really a lot more common than you think. And I think that just us being up here, and thank goodness for Creative Works for letting us be up here, because just general exposure to us being really awesome is very helpful. And so that's generally my do and don't is, if you don't know women, it's your own problem. Go out there, and we're kind of everywhere. I mean, so yeah. If you can't think of any women off the top of your head that you know that are super talented or that you would invite to an event, then go out and meet some women. And we're totally normal, I promise. Yeah, we have lady parts, but we're pretty cool other than that. I don't know what your problem is, but yeah, that's my general do and don't, is just like, get to know more women. We're totally normal and cool.
For me, a do, just like I was saying before about listening and having compassion for other people's experiences, obviously that's a do. If you have the opportunity to create a space for people that is safe and welcoming to marginalized groups of people that are not always made to feel welcome, like whether it's a work environment that's like male dominated, or like Jen's giving a talk tomorrow about sort of that. Love it. Okay. If you have the opportunity to like look at an environment that you could have an impact on and like make that more welcoming to people that historically have not, that's something that's a do. Understanding that your experience is not everyone's experience is a huge one. And I mentioned that, feminism has obviously gone through waves and left out really important groups of people in the past for a number of reasons. It's really important to understand that, like, from where you're, like, I'm a cis white woman, and the issues that are most hard-hitting for me are not the most important to everyone, and it's really important. That felt like something that made me feel like I was sort of left, how do I say? I felt like there was like some like quiz or something I needed to do to be a feminist, like I wanted to be a feminist, but I was like, then I feel like I'm gonna have to talk about these things that are really intimidating to talk about, and everyone's so smart that's like around me that are feminists. But honestly, to approach it like I'm a flawed person who has this life experience and that's all I can come at it with, is really, that's the entry point that you need, is like to understand where you're coming from and that that's not everyone's experience. But if you are considering yourself a feminist, you're trying to make equal opportunities for everyone and be mindful of that. Is that enough ados?
That's enough.
Don't is not doing that, right?
And you gave it a not. That's perfect.
Don't is not doing those things.
Yeah, not do those. Don't do those.
Because I already
Not-
talked too long.
Not do them.
Thank
Not don't do them.
A do, I would think, is if you have the opportunity or if you're someone that has the ability to hire women, take that in consideration and to hire women, especially mothers. Don't think, my don't would be is don't think just because someone is a mother or that they're pregnant or they have kids that they're not going to be as strong to work for you. You got to remember, we get to grow babies in our bodies. Not everybody can do that. That's our superpower. So I think that that's the main thing. We can not only grow those babies, but we can also raise them up and make them the next generation. So always remember that you always have a mother to answer to, and to basically hire women when you have the opportunity to.
I think don't apologize for taking up the space that you should have in the first place. Do celebrate the achievements of your friends and other women. And also, yes, hire women.
I would say don't make people who deserve equal treatment work much harder to get the money or the pay or the recognition that they deserve. Don't make women have to work through holidays and family time and things like that just so that they can get an edge on their male coworkers. I would say do lift up people around you that are talented. I don't think that needs to have any sort of qualification on it. I think if you work with people and you love people that are in your group, you should lift them up and support them no matter what. So I say do support each other.
All right. So I think that as a general takeaway, the thing that I hear from a lot of women that want to talk about the subject is that you have conversations with people, women or men, who don't understand what feminism is. And I think whenever you start having those conversations, it's really easy if you see somebody coming at you and say, like, you have a bias against me. I think your natural instinct is to just be like, no, I don't, for these reasons. Like, I have so many female friends, and like, my mom's so cool. I love my mom. And I think that the natural instinct is to get really defensive, like any sort of time you're being accused of anything. And so I think that the best takeaway with learning and just ingesting this topic is just to listen to the people who are having those real experiences and learn from them. And if you can just be quiet, soak it in, and then ask questions and keep asking more questions until you understand their perspective, and then start having a conversation, that is how you actually learn, and that's how you grow. And that's how I've grown over the past couple of years on this topic. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway that you can have as far as breaching this conversation. So I think if you feel comfortable enough to ask questions, I think we should totally open this up to a Q&A. And I completely forgot to eat my symbolic banana. So I'm going to do that now. So please ask questions while I eat my banana. Oh, we have a very eager question
Down in
asker who
front.
I've never met before in my life.
I'll get up.
I don't know who that is.
How do you feel about calling out microaggressions without feeling like a bitch?
Did you all hear that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you did.
How do you feel about calling out microaggressions without feeling like a bitch?
You are so good at my job. Thank you. I'm busy.
She's busy.
Have you read Lean In? Have you read the book Lean In? You need to read that one. There's a whole book on this subject. I mean, it could be answered for hours.
I think don't worry about being a bitch.
Exactly. Just do what you do and make sure you make your point, and they'll get over it. They'll get over it.
You
Just
guys-
trust me.
Could you talk a little bit more about microaggressions in general and what that means?
When a woman is a threat, if she's perceived as a threat, she's automatically perceived as a bitch. She's not perceived as powerful, or she's not perceived as having a good business sense or making the right decision. The immediate snap to is it goes to that, right? And so that's the way I understand it.
Well, I mean, like a aggression in general is like, if somebody has some sort of a bias or they have a way that they feel about you and the way that you are, and then they make that known to you in a way that's like, they're not being extremely offensive, like where you really need to like defend yourself and be like, that's like not cool for you to do that thing, but it's like subtle and it's ingrained in the way that they feel about you, and it's like almost not worth it to call them out on it. You know, if you're dealing with people all day long and there's like a cat call here and there's someone like scoffing at you for something over there, or like, you know, it's all those things built up, and it's hard because like one of those things can be the straw that broke the camel's back, and you're like crying on the train because somebody's like, yeah, coming at you with some like relatively small thing, but it's like, where is that? How do you deal with that without being a bitch? But Tuesday's answer is cool. Being a bitch is fine. It's fine.
Do we have any other questions?
I guess I have a question statement, sort of. I was speaking with a few people last night about being excited about this panel. My mom did her doctorate on similar topics to this, and so I've had a lot of roundtable discussions in my family, and I wanted to make sure the room knew a quote. A Hewlett-Packard study found that women applied for jobs only when they thought they had only when they had 100% of the job requirements, while men applied when they thought they could do the job about 60% well. So for men in the room, often they see a job and they're excited to try for it, or they know there's an opportunity ahead and how to work for it. And women often don't leap until someone has invited them to leap. And I think for women to empower each other, reminding ourselves how to leap, I think, is so huge. And looking to support through other men and women who can see your value just a little beyond your own current experience is huge. I wondered if anybody on the panel would share a moment when someone helped reach into you and like help you make the leap beyond your current vision for yourself.
No.
I'm thinking.
And I actually just recently learned about this topic. I'm still chewing my banana. But I recently listened to a podcast on investing, and the same stats are true for women in investment and just investing your money. Women don't invest because the stock market has always been formulated by men, and men usually go after investment, even though they don't understand that. They're just like, yeah, I need to do this, so I'm going to put my money in here. And women are like, oh, it is very complicated. Women think it's too complicated. I need to be fully educated in investments before I put my money in there. And we're always like trying to be 100% prepared before we do something. And for investing money, we never feel 100% prepared, so inevitably we don't invest our money. So after I read that or listened to that podcast, I was like, I need to just leap for it. And so I started investing money just last week, actually. Because of that podcast, and because I was like, dang, I deserve to just throw my money in here even though I don't understand it, like a man. Like a woman. So I think that was a really great example for myself.
For me, I had a young lady invite me to a women's empowerment tea party every Monday in Houston.
Oh my.
And so it's basically for us to just get together and love each other as women. And one of the quotes that she read to me was, women empower, but girls compete. And so that was one of those things that stuck in my mind. And I said, wow, women empower, but girls compete. And I'm like, I'm not competing with any of these girls, so I guess I'm a woman now, huh? So through that gave me the encouragement and gave me the strength to find something like this and have the opportunity, like I said, like you said earlier, thank you to Creative Works for allowing me to even be on the panel, but to find other strong women like myself that can be around each other and drink tea or have roundtable discussions. That's always the positive thing that gave me that strength to make that leap.
All right, I think we're ready for the next question based on the amount of eyeballs that are looking at me. Does anyone have, you had a question?
It kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, and it's, I feel like a lot of, at least men, see feminism as a woman's thing, like mainly women support it. So when I state that I'm a feminist or that I support it, people are oftenly surprised. So my really question is like, what can I do as a person and also as a creative and a designer to pretty much help push men to allow to support it and allow to it be okay to support it and make it more of not just it's like a girls' club, it is like for everyone to help and support the whole cause.
I think honestly, just like saying out loud to people that you identify as a feminist is already a lot, because by leading by example, other people can start to feel more comfortable and confident with the idea. Like we were talking about, I think sometimes men can feel effeminate by identifying with women's struggles, but that I think is also a part of feminism, is relieving the emotional constraints that men face in society. So yeah, I think it's incredible to just say it out loud and amplify also women's voices when someone expresses a struggle or concern. I think that is a really good thing that you can do as a supporter. And yeah.
I think a lot of the introduction for me to these ideas too came through artwork. So it was exploring, the things in design that women are doing that have moved me, the things that women are doing in fine art. My brother is in a feminist punk band called Dumbspell, and I had no idea that the music of that genre could even speak to me, and he really put me on that, and that opened me up to a lot of ideas. So it's kind of wading in and figuring out what you're comfortable with, or finding the door that you're comfortable walking through, and then exploring that area. And for everybody, it's going to be different. It may be literature, it may be art, but there's definitely things that can open you up to it and give you a better perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something similar, celebrating women's work, read about women, learn about women, listen to women. If you are already identifying as a feminist and you're not afraid to talk about it, that's huge. But yeah, filling in the gaps that your education left, where you didn't learn about as many women as you did men, and you didn't end up idolizing as many women as you did men, dissect why that is and change it for yourself. Idolizing is not a very good word, but it is a word.
Yeah, it is. I think in general, just being vulnerable is really important to everything. So if you can say, I'm a feminist and here's my journey as to how I became one. Here's where I started is really important. I like talking about, at first I was like, that's a really gross term. I don't like it at all, to listening and ingesting and then coming around to it and then happily identifying as a feminist. And I think just being vulnerable and talking about your struggles with the topic is really will speak volumes for yourself and for just communicating that with others. And I think in general, vulnerability helps a lot with having conversations and getting people to open up themselves and new ideas. Any other questions? Yes.
I think as a graphic designer, we make up the media, a large part of it. How you're saying we influence a lot of what we see. So it's like, how do you help the situation? Because I've had to make projects, and it's like I feel like I'm playing on those stereotypes. So it's like, what do you do? Do you make a unisex design, or do you just stick to those stereotypes because that's what's most powerful and that's what'll get your message across? Like, how do you help?
I think that's part of what I am interested in with being self-employed and starting to sell a line of products, is trying to push those boundaries, and like Tuesday was saying, not having to have it be approved by anyone in sales and have somebody say we can't sell something like that because it's not going to appeal to the sort of market that you're wanting to appeal to. Being my own boss on those kinds of things lets me try out some more androgynous styles on something, or I'm not sure. I know what you mean, and that is a tough call when you have a client or you have a certain base that you want to reach with the project. but when you can push those boundaries, it's important too, I think, because having organic line work always be perceived as delicate and soft is problematic, and it's a bummer. And that like masculine lines are the ones that are perceived as strong and bold and will stand the test of time, like if a logo mark is a certain way. Pushing those boundaries when you can. Is this answering your question? Yeah. I just feel like, okay.
Do you think
I started.
we're getting close to that? Like,
I think that you might be surprised with like the amount of people that would see your design that was pushing the envelope and appreciate it. I feel like by not pushing the envelope, we're giving permission to keep using those same stereotypes. I think, people, there's some dumb people in the world, but I think people are generally like less stupid than we, give them credit for. And I think people appreciate it when they see something unique or a unique take on something. And, obviously your take would be different than my take. And I think that's really beautiful. So I don't know, keep pushing the envelope. I think people appreciate it.
Can you shout it out and we'll repeat it?
Yeah, my question comes down to, I was actually brought up in Melbourne, so that's probably, I'm bringing all that. But my question, I consider myself more feminist now, but my question comes down to, growing up, I was brought up that women were women and men were men. And I guess more as a feminist now, I believe there's not necessarily something wrong with that. It's just showing that just because a girl or a woman is a woman, and may look at it something a certain way, and a guy may look at it a certain way, there's nothing wrong with the equality. You just need to, as a guy, me, I just need to feel that just because a woman looks at something a certain way, she is not any less than me. That she should still receive the same equal pay. I guess going back to what Matt said, as a guy, if somebody said, well, you're a feminist, growing up, I would have felt very, very, oh, they're calling me a girl. And I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. So is there a way to approach it now where you can still acknowledge that making a design that might be softer from a girl, there's nothing wrong with that? Or that making a design from a guy, because my designs can be more masculine now. Is there anything wrong with that? Or do I hurt the feminist movement by having that mentality?
I don't think so. I think like as a personal taste, if like that's what you're into, like if you're Caesar in the front row looking to push the boundaries a little bit more, certainly I feel like that's to be respected and that's a path that you should go after. But if, a more stereotypically masculine design floats your boat and makes you feel good, like when you're designing it, then I don't see why you shouldn't, just like I love making things that have some stereotypically feminine undertones. I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but the knowledge or going forward, making things with that knowledge in the back of your head, I think keeps you from making bigoted decisions in design. But there's nothing inherently wrong with creating a more masculine looking design.
It's not so much about the aesthetic, it's about you having the foresight and the perspective, right? Mm-hmm. To know that it's not an aesthetic choice, it's a choice on how people are actually treated at the end of the day. What's the final product and how does that treat other people?
I think this is generally a great ongoing conversation, something that we are sort of figuring out as we go along. And I think that this is a really great topic and conversation that we can have outside of this auditorium, outside when we get home. And it's something that I think we can solve together. We can try to figure it out together as a community. But I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer as far as masculine versus feminine aesthetic goes. But that's okay because we're all learning together. So we'll figure it out. You had a question, right? Yeah. Yeah, the question was how do we keep men from thinking that we're basically man-haters? How do we turn that around and change that perception of feminists?
There's different levels of feminism. There's like the girly feminist. There's different levels to it. And just like how when I first stated what I was saying was like, I don't hate men, but there's some women that might feel that way. You just put your point across, and like he said up there, just making everybody feel equal no matter what, however you're displaying yourself. It's about equality at the end of the day. We've had a lot of people who fought for civil rights, for equality, and that's all it is. Even Miss Rosa Parks, who sat on that bus, she was fighting for equality. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white, man, or woman, we all want to be created and treated equally here. And that's the end of the day. So even when you mention it, you don't have to get lumped into anything. It's just the box. If you let them put you in that box, then that's where they're going to put you. But if you can speak up for yourself, you're going to always outspeak them and let them know it's about education, not ignorance.
Yeah, if someone is if someone is making that if someone is drawing that conclusion about you labeling or identifying as a feminist, and they out loud are saying like, oh, so you hate men, instead of just like thinking that inside and not allowing you to explain yourself, it's most productive, I think, when you can like turn it back on them and sort of say in whatever way you can that believing in equality for all people is what it means to be a feminist, and sort of allowing them to dissect or sort of kind of look into why they draw that conclusion. Yeah, because people like to lump things together. And if you support a movement like Black Lives Matter, people are like, oh, so only Black Lives Matter? And you're like, nope, that is not what I said. But if you're allowing me this opportunity and we can have this conversation, then let's think through why you jumped to that conclusion, and you'd like to just be like, oh, I get it. That's how you feel. Because you don't always have that opportunity, and it is frustrating, and you end up saying a lot of the same things, but having this conversation is super important. So when you get the chance, it does make a difference.
I think we have time for one more question, so go ahead. Just shout, I'll repeat.
All right. It's kind of more of a statement and then into a question, but kind of going back on thinking about the importance of the internet, and kind of historically, we were only really able to kind of find role models within our own little tribes. We were only exposed to kind of our 200-person kind of bubble. And kind of up until really recent history, there were kind of clear paths for people. And I think it's amazing that we live in a time where we're exposed to people all across the world. So I'm really just curious on who you guys are kind of looking at for inspiration, men, women, kind of in the art realm, outside of the art realm, just kind of following their passions and motivating you to kind of keep pushing yourself forward.
Okay, the statement was that due to the glory of the internet, we have access to all kinds of cultures and communities and types of people, and the question was, who do we look towards on the internet for inspiration?
I really love Lonnie Barcena, who does Hell's Bells clothing. I was interviewed with her, did a co-interview for a magazine in Los Angeles, and they paired us together because, we both make clothing and we both come from kind of like a little bit more of like a streetwear feminist bent, but are at very different places, and our brands are very different. And she is incredible, and she makes, she has this established brand that she kind of built out of her career working at Rockaware, and she just is the definition of a kick-ass woman, and really inspires me to keep going with clothing and making something unique and different and made in Los Angeles. So that's who for me.
Micah already knows this, but the Black Madonna has been a huge inspiration to me. She's from Chicago, a resident Smart Bar. She's a female producer and DJ, and she lives in Berlin now. She's a Bergheim Panorama Bar DJ. She opened me up to so many things, like the LGBT community, feminism, just by speaking openly on the internet in very candid ways, like through Instagram and Facebook. She opened me up to ideas I would never have been open to, and I was really surprised to be influenced through the techno community as opposed to graphic design. So the Black Madonna is amazing. You should all go look at her documentary on Rosetta Bizer YouTube.
I would honestly say, and I don't like to be the stereotypical one, but Beyonce was a big influence for me. I wasn't a big Beyonce fan, and so that's just me. I like my Alicia Keys and my Erykah Badu, and recently some of the things that Beyonce has been putting out in her music and in her actions and her vibe has definitely been very encouraging and has given me that empowerment that I've been looking for.
My heart is racing. This is like the hardest question that came out of nowhere. I feel like it'd be really off-brand for me to not talk about Kathleen Hanna for 1 second. And if anyone's like not familiar with the Punk Singer, the documentary that's about her, it's a really good like entry point into girl-fronted punk bands. And I was always more inspired by music than visual artists, and I love a lot of them. But I was always most moved to make my own visual art by listening to songs, and she was like the one for me, of like someone who's just totally unapologetic, like lets it all hang out and is like, things are messed up and for these reasons, and I'm gonna tell you about it, and I'm gonna be like really sexy and powerful, and like you're gonna listen to me. And I think, yeah, the movement was flawed and whatever, but it's cool to still watch the documentary. I don't know, like it was the 90s and we didn't have what we have now, and like, again, people were left out and people could be like, she's some people's feminist icon, but not everyone's, and I get it. But I just saw her like a couple weekends ago, and she's still very influential. Yeah.
My inspiration is my mom, who was a housewife and then a stay-at-home mom, and she lived the life that she thought she should have because that's what people told her she should have. And she never thought that she should have a career. And she raised me to have the life that I thought I should have and not listen to what anybody else thought I should have for myself or what I deserved. And she wanted me to have whatever I deserved and whatever I thought I could have. So my mom has always pushed me to do whatever I think I can do. And I think she's a really great reminder of how far we've come in the past since I was a kid or since she was a kid. Are you crying? No, it's okay. It's okay. Oh, that was great. Thank you. Any other questions? I think we're almost out of time. Oh, no. Oh. Yeah.
So many questions.
Oh, there are so many hands. I can't. Oh, this is the hardest part of my job. I don't even know. Oh, shoot. How do we decide? Who was first? Just pick one? Maybe I should pick no one. Is that better? I know, I can't. Okay, I can't hardly see. I see many fingers pointing towards you right there.
Oh, hi. Oh, hey, Kelsey.
Hey,
right?
Meg, I was told that we have 2 more.
Oh, we have 2 more. Oh,
We
no,
can do
I
2
have
more.
to do this again. Okay.
It's never happened to me. That'd be cool. You mean like, what show is it for you?
Why don't you explain in case people couldn't hear, like the whole girls to the front?
Sure. Yeah, she was sort of like more or less responding to what I was saying about. I mentioned my person that I look up to is Kathleen Hanna, and she fronted this punk band in the '90s called Bikini Kill, and then she formed a band Le Tigre, and now she's in the Julie Ruin, and she is like one of the main players in the Riot Girl movement from the '90s, where like these girls recognized that they didn't feel like they had a place in punk culture, and all these guy-fronted bands were like not as inclusive. And at the actual shows, there was like this release of like masculine energy that is a mosh pit and ends up resulting in like having girls be pushed to the back and they can't enjoy shows as much. So her thing when she had her platform for her own shows. She was like, if anyone's messing with you and you're a girl and you feel like if you like don't have if you're not able to enjoy the show like from where you are, like push up to the front, and like would have the girls actually like sit on the stage and just to make sure they could have their rightfully good time at a show. And I think your question was like, has that ever happened at a show? That they've explicitly said that? No, not necessarily. But I don't go to enough shows anymore, so maybe that's why. I hope it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you.
Well, I've been freelance for a really long time. But I've experienced a pay gap that relates to my own confidence, like we were talking about. Maybe feeling like you deserve less because you're like, oh, well, maybe I haven't been working in this field as much as other people, so like you feel like you're kind of getting away with something for charging at all, which is crazy. But, you know, realizing later that I could have gotten more money from a project if I would have been confident enough to ask for it, and realizing that like my male counterparts that are also working on a project are getting paid double. But I can't speak to a pay gap in a non-freelance environment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've worked in agency and freelance, and now I work in a real estate developer, so like spectrum of design work. And I think it's important for women to have mentors that are strong women, but also strong men, and like don't shy away from chatting with them one-on-one occasionally, like once a quarter, twice a year, about where you fit and the salary expectation, and be really cool about it. And so I've had some dudes like challenge me, like, if you're not earning X by this date in the year, like you need to step up for yourself. And that was really awesome. That was like a male piece. And then also an exercise we did with fellow creatives. It was like 8 or 9 of us. We got together. We all had the same like pencil, so it was really anonymous. We wrote our estimated hourly and our estimated salary. We turned it upside down, mixed it up, and reviewed. And then we all knew with reasonable anonymity what the spectrum was in the room. So like I could have a real like, okay, West Coast Canadian, this is approximate. Am I in the healthy spectrum, or am I falling off the edge? So it was really good, and a couple people realized they were like super low and like needed 20 grand up to just catch up to like cost of living. So it gave them confidence to know, okay, a couple years out of school, this is where I can be.
That's amazing. And Kate said it yesterday. We don't talk about money as a culture. It's not something that we openly discuss like that. And that's a real problem. Like, that's the only way that other men who want women to catch up can even know that there's a gap in the first place. So if we start to have those types of conversations, if you didn't hear, she said everybody wrote down salary expectations, turned them upside down, and mixed them up so that you could at least get a perspective of it. I think that's fascinating.
Absolutely. Does anybody else in the audience have experience with pay gap? No, you don't. I think this is really fascinating. It still blows my mind that some of us in the audience get paid more than others just because they're man. That seems so bizarre to me. I can't see anything. Is anyone? No one's raising their hand. There you are.
I was 16 years old, working at my first job at a summer camp, and I realized years later when I was talking to some of the other first years that I got paid, I don't know, 16 years, a couple $100 more my first year.
Your first year.
Some were guys, and maybe it was because I had connections or I knew people, and maybe my family was involved, but it was astounding to me that I got paid so much more than some of the other first years for the same level of experience.
I think people expect us to not talk about how much we make, so people generally have bias and they pay us appropriately towards their bias, and they expect we're not going to talk. And I think that our secret power is that we can talk and we can share and we can get to the bottom of it. Yeah.
I don't they do. And so I feel like being open, talking about this with them, not in the like throwing out numbers sense, but in the sense of just creating an open dialogue within a larger company about it.
That's such a good point. The point was that you don't even have to be talking about numbers if you work at a company. You can just, as long as you have an open dialogue to talking about equality and making sure that women are as equal as men and vice versa
Right,
within
and
your
that
company.
that all of the women shouldn't have to shoulder all of that responsibility.
Yeah,
that you
it's
should
not-
be holding
it's
leaders
not on us.
accountable.
That's a great point.
One of the most shocking things about working at a charity is we have financial disclosures that are openly available to the public. And so I can literally see what every single person makes just by downloading a PDF. And you would not believe how it changes the face of who you work for, because you know, like, when those gaps exist, they're glaring and obvious because they have to be disclosed by law. Just a tidbit.
A little tidbit. Okay, you're so excited. I don't know when to stop. I can't even see anything. Are we stopping? Yes? What are you saying?
How long is your question?
Like no, we're wrapping up.
It was just to tell the men in the room, I'm really so, like, it's heartwarming that you guys are really open to trying to make the world a more equitable place for both men and women. And one thing that I thought of is that all men, if a woman, if you ever do have the opportunity, if a woman brings a concern to you in a professional environment and says, I have this concern, I'm being felt like this certain way, that you can take that and respond in a way that validates that and that, you know, implies that you believe that there is a valid concern there and not belittling it or laughing about it or other things that tend to happen perfectly.
That's the only way we're going to have any kind of change, is if they do. Thank you. That was
Yeah.
good.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for coming. Thank you. Thanks to you.